Hey guys, tonight we step right into a muddy little village lane, the kind that squishes between your toes if you dare to wear shoes that leak. And before you even have time to take in the scenery, there's that smell, something like wet straw, a bit of barnyard, and if you're honest with yourself, just a faint note of, oh, trouble ahead. You are about to find out that, in a world without medicine, surviving the plague is more about stubbornness and community than anything else. And maybe, just maybe, you won't survive the first day if you keep staring at the clouds instead of watching your step. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'm always curious. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The mud takes your boot with an unkind slurp. That's the very first sound you hear when you walk into the village. And for a split second, as you try to wrestle your foot out of that sticky brown mess, you think, maybe the mud is the least of your problems. Because the air is wrong. You've smelled spring mornings before, grass, dew, manure, the usual, but this is different. This air is heavy. It has a faint, sour tang that makes you wonder if something is rotting just out of sight. People will later tell you that this is the smell of a world turning upside down, but for now, you only know it feels like trouble. You glance around. Thatched roofs sag like tired shoulders, and the walls of these timber-framed homes seem to be holding their breath. Chickens scurry out of your way, making sharp, irritated noises as if they, too, are on edge. You don't see many people at first. Those you do see, well, they keep their heads down. They move quickly, like they're afraid of standing still. That's when you notice the doorways. Almost every door is shut tight, and many have sprigs of herbs tied above them. Some are bundles of dried lavender, others are rosemary or sage. Someone has even tied garlic to a lintel, and, though it looks a bit ridiculous, you understand why. Everyone is trying to keep the sickness out. But here's the thing. No one in this village really knows what the sickness is. Word reached you days ago, whispered from one traveler to another, something terrible is spreading. It started somewhere far away, maybe Italy, maybe a port city you can't even pronounce. History will one day call it the Black Death. But for you, here, right now, it's just the pestilence. You walk farther in, and you feel like an outsider, someone who has shown up late to a very serious meeting. The first real sign that something is very, very wrong. Silence. Villages are rarely quiet. Normally you'd hear the clatter of a smith at his forge, kids shrieking as they chase a dog, women gossiping as they draw water from the well. Instead, the only thing you hear is the faint moan of the wind as it pushes through narrow lanes. And then you catch sight of your first neighbor. She's a thin woman, wrapped in a wool cloak even though it isn't cold. She's got a scarf pulled so high over her mouth and nose that only her eyes show, and those eyes widen when she sees you. Don't stand there, she hisses, waving her hand like she's shooing a goose. Move along. It's not personal. Everyone's scared. You try to ask what's happening, but she's already slammed the door shut. This is how your first day begins. You find the well. It's always the heart of a village, and you know that if there are answers, they'll be here. Except there are no answers, only more questions. A cluster of people stands around it, speaking in low, hurried voices. They hold buckets and jugs, but none of them wants to be close to each other. There's a good meter or two between them, as if an invisible wall surrounds every person. Did you hear about the miller? Someone whispers. Gone, another says, shaking their head. Yesterday. Whole family shut inside. God help us. You dip your bucket and hope no one notices that you are new here. This is the part where you start to feel it, the thin line between normal life and chaos. Yesterday, you were still thinking about planting barley. You were worrying about whether the cow would calve safely. Today, you realize those thoughts have been shoved aside. Survival has become your only plan. And it's strange, because you don't even see the sickness yet. There are no bodies in the street, no carts of the dead. That part will come later. Right now, you are living in the tension before the storm, when people are just beginning to sense that something invisible is moving among them. Here's a piece of knowledge you may not expect: medieval peasants don't know germs. They have no concept of bacteria. To them, disease comes from bad air, what they call miasma. And so, they tie herbs over their doors. They burn sweet-smelling wood. They think if the air smells nice, the sickness can't find a way in. It's not entirely crazy. After all, some herbs do repel fleas. And fleas, though no one knows it yet, are the silent messengers of this plague. But nobody here can see that connection. They just know that the air is heavy and wrong. As you haul the bucket up from the well, you can't help but wonder how long you'll last. You think about the villages on the road behind you, the empty ones, the shuttered windows, the single cart rolling out with a pile of straw-covered shapes. You think about how quiet it has become, like the world is holding its breath. You look around and realize, this village is still breathing. Barely. For now. You decide to linger, because your own legs are trembling. And because this is the one place where you can still pretend things are normal, fetching water, like people always do. You dip your hands into the bucket, splashing cool liquid onto your face, and for a moment the cold shock pulls you out of your spinning thoughts. The woman next to you mutters something under her breath. "Sorry," you say. "I said," she repeats, a little louder, "don't let the water touch your lips unless you say a prayer first." And she does, a quick whisper, a sign of the cross, and only then does she drink. You do the same, half out of respect, half because, in times like these, you don't want to tempt fate. Later, as you wander the lane, you notice a strange detail: almost every house has its windows covered, not with glass, glass is rare, but with cloth soaked in vinegar. Someone tells you this is another way to keep the sickness out. Vinegar, they believe, cleans the air. And while you might find the smell sharp and a little headache-inducing, it does make the whole street reek of pickles, which, you admit, is a peculiar change from the usual scent of manure. There are little signs of life though. A child, barefoot and curious, peeks from behind a doorway. She stares at you with the open, fearless eyes of someone too young to understand. Her mother yanks her back inside. A dog trots past, ribs showing, tail tucked low. Even animals seem quieter these days. History books will later argue about when the plague first reached villages like this. Some say it was 1347, others a year or two after. Scholars will still be debating routes of transmission centuries later. Did it come with merchants? Soldiers? Rats from ships? But standing here, none of that matters. All you know is that it's here now. And as the wind rattles the shutters, you understand. Life, as you knew it yesterday, is gone. The sun is dipping low, smearing the sky with orange. You consider leaving, but something tells you to stay close to the village tonight. You find a small bench beside a barn, where you can watch the fields. They look deceptively calm, a patchwork of green and gold under the fading light. Somewhere far off, a cow lows, a long, mournful sound. This is the quiet before the next chapter of your life. And as you sit there, with mud still on your boots and the smell of herbs in the air, you make yourself a silent promise. You're going to do everything you can to make it through this. Even if everything turns out to be something as simple as keeping your head down and listening to what the village does to survive. Because in this world, you realize, survival isn't about medicine. It's about stubbornness. About community. And sometimes, about luck. You just hope you have enough of all three. The first thing you hear the next morning isn't birds. It's voices. Low, quick, tense, as if someone has gathered a bundle of worries and is shaking them out over the square. You follow the sound, boots squishing in the mud. And sure enough, the market, the village's little stretch of stalls and crooked tables, is alive with a kind of cautious chaos. People stand in uneven lines, all of them keeping a curious space between each other. Not a full cart's length, just enough that you could swing your arms wide and still miss the next person. That's what fear looks like when it seeps into the daily routine, distance. The stalls are thin today. There's no bright pile of turnips or fresh cheese wheels. Instead, you see a few loaves of bread, some onions with their papery skins flaking away, and one nervous goose tied to a post, honking as if to announce that this is, in fact, the worst day to be a goose. You catch pieces of conversations as you pass. They say it came from the ports, one man mutters. No, it came from the south, another interrupts, with the confidence of someone who is almost always wrong. Italy, maybe Spain. The Lord's wrath, carried on the wind. You pause, pretending to inspect a small basket of apples so you can listen without looking too obvious. A woman with a shawl pulled tight around her shoulders lowers her voice. They say in the city there are carts. Carts that come every morning and just, she hesitates, swallowing hard. Just pile them up. Bodies. Like firewood. You don't need to imagine that. Your own journey here gave you glimpses, the locked gates, the houses with chalk marks on the doors, the empty fields. The market falls quiet for a moment. And then someone, probably trying to lighten the mood, says, well, at least the bread is still warm, and gestures to the stall. The baker, a broad-shouldered man with flour dusted over his arms, gives a humorless laugh. Warm because I barely slept, he says. No apprentices left. The last one, well. Let's just say he won't be needing dough again. Nobody laughs. This is how news spreads here. Not through letters. Not through neat scrolls sealed with wax. Just a handful of words, passed from mouth to mouth. The plague itself seems to move faster than the stories about it. And yet, for all the fear, the market is still here. People still come. Because no matter how much death brushes past, you still need bread. You still need onions. And, most importantly, you still need to know that other people are still alive. You realize something, the market is not just for food. It's a place to take the temperature of the world, to see who's still standing. You wander past a table where a few dried herbs are laid out, sage, mint, thyme. The herb seller eyes you warily. Protection, she says, before you can even ask. Hang it on your door. Burn it. Rub it on your hands. Smell keeps the bad air away. You almost want to ask if bad air can smell fear. Instead, you nod and pick up a small bunch. It's not like you have a better plan. As you hand over a couple of copper coins, she leans closer, not too close, just close enough that you can hear the whisper. You watch, she says, next will come the rats. When you see them bold as dogs, chewing the grain sacks right in front of you, then you'll know. She says it like a prophecy. And then, like a little absurd painting, you notice a boy, no more than 10, trying to sell a single chicken. He's holding it by its feet. The chicken has the calm expression of a creature that has given up all plans for the day. Why only one chicken, you ask him. He shrugs. That's all I got. You realize there's an entire story behind that shrug, parents too sick to stand here, a family that needs food. And so this boy stands where his father or mother used to. You buy the chicken, even though you don't really need it. He brightens just a little as he takes the coin, and you think, maybe you needed that brightness more than the chicken. Further down, a juggler is trying, very valiantly, to make a living. He's got 3 wooden balls and a painted hat, and he's spinning them in the air like he's in the middle of a fair. No one claps. They look, though. For a second, the tension lifts just a little. And maybe that's the point. Not entertainment. Distraction. History fact for you, yes, even now, you can't help thinking like a storyteller. During the Great Plague years, traveling entertainers often carried the news between villages. They'd juggle, sing, play a tune on a pipe, and in the pauses they'd whisper the latest gossip. They were walking, juggling newspapers, except the headlines were always grim. Some historians say these performers helped people cope, kept spirits alive when everything else was falling apart. Others argue they might have spread the disease faster, since they moved from town to town. Scholars are still debating that one, centuries later. But today, right now, you are just glad someone is willing to make a fool of themselves in front of a nervous crowd. You trade 2 apples from your own bag to get a hunk of bread from the baker. The crust is dark, a little burnt, but it's warm. And the warmth, you realize, is what you were buying. You tear it in half and sit on the edge of the square. From here, you can see everything, the merchant rearranging his few onions, the goose, still honking indignantly, the way people approach, grab what they need, and leave quickly. There is no lingering anymore. Even the gossip is quick, as if fear itself is impatient. You notice something strange. Every so often, someone passes by and tosses a coin into a small wooden bowl on a stool. There's no stall behind it, no goods for sale. Just a bowl. You ask the man sitting next to you, "What's that for?" He shrugs. "For the sick. The ones stuck in their houses." Someone takes the money, buys food, leaves it on their doorstep. Who takes it? No one knows. It just disappears. And somehow bread shows up. It's not an official system. It's just what people do when everything else is falling apart. While you chew your bread, you think about how strange it is. Life shrinks, but it doesn't stop. The market still opens. People still haggle, still trade, still carry water from the well. They are afraid, yes, but they are also stubborn. And you understand that this is the thread they hold on to. A thin, fraying thread, but still strong enough to pull you through another day. And here's a little surprise, the sound of music. Someone has pulled out a small, battered hurdy-gurdy. The notes are a little wobbly, but they wind through the market like a brave little bird. For a few minutes, everyone slows down. Some even smile, faintly, as if remembering that joy is still a thing that exists. It's a strange contrast, the world feels like it's breaking, but a single tune can patch a small corner of it. You leave the market with a few small things, bread, some onions, the bunch of herbs, and a feeling you didn't expect. Hope. Not much of it, but a little. Because as long as there's still a market, as long as people still whisper rumors and share news, the world hasn't ended yet. By the time you get back to the edge of the village, the sun is already sliding down, spilling light like melted honey across the rooftops. You glance back at the market. The goose is still there, still honking. The juggler is bowing to no applause. And people, one by one, are gathering up their things and retreating into their homes. The square empties. And once again, the silence falls like a heavy cloak. You head to the barn where you slept last night. It's quiet there, just the smell of straw and the distant rustle of a mouse. You sit, unwrap the bread, and take another bite. Your jaw aches from chewing, it's the kind of bread that doubles as a building material, but you savor it anyway. You think about all the rumors, all the whispers. And about the fact that, for one more day, you are still here. And in this world, that counts as victory. The stars come out one by one. And as you drift to sleep, you can still hear faintly, far away, the echo of that hurdy-gurdy tune. For a little while, it almost sounds like home. When dawn comes, it comes gray. Not golden, not gentle, just a pale, tired light that barely manages to seep through the cracks in the thatched roof above your head. You lie still for a long moment, listening to the quiet breathing of the barn around you, the shuffle of mice in the straw, the slow huff of a cow, the way the wood creaks like it has its own dreams. And then you remember, today you're supposed to be home. Home is a short walk down the lane, past the cluster of cottages, to the place you've known since you were a child. You pull yourself up, brush the bits of hay from your clothes, and step outside. The air is wet, as though it has been washed but never dried. The sky feels low. You make your way past the market square. It's empty now, only a few overturned baskets and a lonely goose feather stuck in the mud. It looks smaller in the morning. At the edge of the village, the houses grow farther apart. They huddle together in pairs and threes, as if keeping each other company. And finally, there it is, the house that smells like smoke and straw. You stop outside and take it in. The walls are made of wattle and daub, thin sticks, woven and covered with a pale, uneven mix of mud and straw. It's the kind of house that looks like it would blow over in a good wind, but somehow it has stood here for decades. The roof sags like an old dog's back. And you love it. The first thing you do when you step inside is duck. The doorway is low, so low you could knock yourself out if you aren't careful. Inside, it's dim. The only real light comes from a small hole near the roof, where the smoke escapes. Except the smoke doesn't always escape. Most of it just hangs there in the rafters, filling the house with a smell that's equal parts warmth and cough. This, by the way, is not a mistake. People in your time burn green wood on purpose, let the room fill with smoke, because smoke is your insect repellent. It keeps the bugs away, it dries the meat hanging from the beams, and, maybe most importantly now, it's believed to purify the air. And in a world where you can't afford a doctor, smoke and prayer are what you've got. The floor is nothing but hard-packed earth. A couple of rush mats lie across it, a patchy cover of last year's reeds. Somewhere in the corner, there's a low wooden bed, if you can call it that, stuffed with straw and covered with a rough blanket. Your mother always says, the blanket isn't warm. It's the body underneath it that's warm. She's not wrong. And then there's the hearth. It's the heart of everything. It's where you cook, where you sit, where you tell stories when the nights are long and the fields are frozen. The fire is never allowed to go out, not if you can help it. If it does, you'll have to beg a coal from a neighbor, and even in good times that feels like asking for their heartbeat. You feed the fire carefully. Today, the smoke seems thicker. Maybe that's just your imagination. Maybe not. You walk to the shelf near the wall. It's just a rough plank balanced on two pegs, but it holds the most precious things you own, a clay cup, a wooden bowl, a small pot of dried rosemary. The rosemary is your mother's doing. She swears by it. Breathe it in, she tells you. Keeps the sickness out. Does it? You don't know. But the smell, sharp and clean, makes you feel better for a moment. The room is small, so small that if you stretch your arms you could almost touch both walls at once. And yet, this little house is a fortress. Because here's the truth, you don't have medicine. You don't have science. What you do have is control over one small space, and every little thing you do, burning herbs, keeping the smoke, tying charms over the door, feels like putting a tiny stone in a very large dam. When you sit by the fire, you notice something unusual, a bundle hanging from the beam above your head. It's a little pouch made from a piece of cloth. Inside, you know, are dried flowers. This is called a posy. It's like a medieval air freshener, but more hopeful. People believe that if you keep good smells close, bad air can't get into you. It's also the reason for that old nursery rhyme, ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posies. Scholars still argue whether that rhyme actually came from the plague years or much later. You may never know the answer, but here in your house, a posy is just one more shield against the unknown. Your father has been out cutting wood all morning. He comes in, shoulders wide, arms carrying a small bundle of damp logs. He doesn't say much, just nods, tosses the logs near the fire, and then sits down heavily. You notice his hands. They're cracked from work, stained with the kind of dirt that never fully washes away. And yet, when he speaks, it isn't about the fields. It's moving, he says quietly. You know what he means. Word has reached even here, in the next valley over, someone has fallen sick. And not just sick, sick in that way. The way everyone whispers about but no one describes. Your father stares at the fire. He doesn't need to say anything else. You both know what it means, it's time to close ranks. For the next hour, the house is busy with preparation. You fetch more herbs from the shelf, hang them in the rafters. Your mother wipes the table with vinegar, a smell so sharp it makes your eyes water. She swears the vinegar keeps sickness away. It's a ritual that gives her hands something to do when her thoughts are too loud. Your father checks the cracks in the door, pushes straw into the gaps to keep out the draft. And through all of this, there is no panic. Just a steady, methodical determination. If you can't stop the plague, you can at least build a wall against it. By midday, the smoke has thickened enough that your eyes sting. You open the small roof hole to let a little out, then close it again. The smell of the house has become a thing of its own, with smoke, herbs, and fear. There's a moment in the afternoon when the wind picks up outside. It rattles the walls, lifts the edges of the thatch, makes the whole house shiver. You press your hand against the wood, as if holding it steady. This is what safety feels like now, a room, a fire, and walls made of mud. When the light begins to fade, you hear the church bells again. They toll slowly, each note rolling down the valley like a heavy stone. Someone else is gone. You sit with your family by the fire, your knees almost touching. And for a while, no one speaks. You listen to the crackle of the fire and the sound of your own breathing. And you think, if this little house can hold out, maybe you can too. When you wake up, there is one thought pressing on you, louder than church bells, louder than the sound of the crows outside. Hunger. It's not a polite hunger, not the kind that says, "Oh, a warm loaf would be nice." No, it's the kind that climbs into your ribs and knocks, asking, "What do you have for me today?" And honestly, you don't know. You step outside. The morning mist sits low, and beyond it, you can see the fields. Or at least, what used to be fields. Once, this time of year, you would have seen furrows neat as combed hair, already sprouting with green. Now, you see tall, untidy grass swallowing up the plowed lines, and the broken skeletons of wooden fences leaning like drunk men. No one is out there turning the soil. Why? Because no one is left to turn it. The men who used to bend their backs to those fields are either sick, or gone, or taking care of someone who is. You walk through the village path, your boots dragging in the dirt, and you realize that the landscape has grown quiet. A farm without people doesn't stay orderly. It becomes wild very quickly. That neat orchard where you used to steal apples as a child. Overgrown, branches like claws. That stretch of barley you could once smell on the wind. It's just weeds now. You wonder, for a fleeting moment, if the weeds are happy about this new world. By the time you reach your little garden behind the house, you already know the answer to the question that woke you. No, there isn't much to eat today. You crouch low and check what survived. A few onions, their tops pale but alive. A handful of parsnips clinging stubbornly to the soil. Some dried peas hanging in a small cloth sack from last summer. It's something. But not enough. You think about bread. Warm, soft bread. Then you think about reality. The bread you have left is as hard as a brick, and if you dropped it on your foot, you'd limp for a week. Still, it is food. You take the loaf from the shelf, knock it against the table, it makes a sound like knocking on wood, and then soak it in hot water with a bit of onion to soften it. This, by the way, is called sop, bread soaked in broth or water. It is the medieval answer to the question, how do you eat something that could double as a building material? And as you sit there, chewing slowly, you tell yourself, this is fine. It's fine. But in the back of your mind, you can't help thinking, what about next week? That's the problem now. It isn't just hunger today. It's hunger tomorrow. Hunger next month. When no one farms, when no one trades, the usual rhythm of food, plant, grow, harvest, bake, is broken. And so you find yourself learning new rhythms. First rhythm, foraging. You walk along the edge of the fields, looking for things you used to ignore. Dandelions. Nettles. Hazelnuts that the squirrels haven't already stolen. Even acorns, you can grind them, if you're patient enough to leach out the bitterness. You become an expert at knowing which hedgerows hide something edible. And every time you find something, even a handful of wild berries, it feels like a little miracle. Second rhythm, stretching. Everything you have, you stretch like wool on a spindle. One onion makes 3 meals, stew, then broth, then the boiled onion mashed with a scrap of bread. The dried peas? They sit in a jar like tiny beads of gold, measured out a fistful at a time. Sometimes, you even grind peas into flour to bake them with rye or barley. If you want a recipe, take whatever flour you can get, add some peas, and prepare for bread that tastes like the inside of an old boot. But it fills you. Third rhythm, trading. This is where the village comes in. The market may be smaller, but it's still a lifeline. A neighbor with a goat might trade a bit of milk for onions. Another has a few eggs. Sometimes, you even trade tasks. You fetch water for someone too weak to walk, and they pay you in a small pouch of dried beans. It isn't money, really. It's survival disguised as generosity. On good days, when there's a little spare, someone brings out a pot and makes pottage. Now, if you've never had medieval pottage, let me explain. Imagine you have a big pot. You throw in water, some grains, maybe a handful of dried peas, a chopped root vegetable, and, if the saints are smiling, a scrap of bacon or a bone. You let it boil all day over the hearth. And that's it. That's dinner. You eat it with bread. You eat it with hope. And the next day, you add more water and call it fresh. On bad days, though, you chew on the bread brick. Or you crack a hazelnut open with a rock and pretend it's a feast. There's an old woman at the edge of the village, she knows every edible plant in the hedges. Some people whisper that she's half-witch, but you suspect she just pays attention. She shows you how to boil nettles, carefully, so they don't sting, how to mash roots into a sort of mash that, with your eyes closed, could almost be, well, edible. She also tells you that some people eat snails. You haven't gotten that desperate. Yet. One day, as you're digging in the garden for something, anything, you hit on a weird discovery. In a little clay jar, left over from last autumn, you find a handful of hazelnuts and 2 shriveled apples. You laugh out loud. Not because it's funny, but because it feels like a treasure chest. You don't even eat them all at once. You save them. You sit down that night with your family, split the apples into slices so thin you can see the firelight through them. That's how you measure wealth these days, in slices. And here's the thing that makes it both better and worse, sometimes, food becomes more plentiful. Wait, what? Yes. After the first terrible wave of sickness, when so many fields are left empty, there are fewer mouths to feed. So the stores that still exist, last longer. Some scholars argue that, in the decades after the plague, people who survived ended up with more food than they'd ever had before. Others say that for most peasants, especially at the start, it was nothing but hunger. Even now, historians can't quite agree on how bad the shortage was in different years. But for you, in this moment, in this season, it feels bad enough. At night, when your stomach growls like a wolf, you lie awake thinking of the harvests that should have been. Golden wheat. Rows of peas. Cabbages as big as a baby's head. Instead, you dream of a single piece of soft bread. And yet, you are still here. Every day you wake up, you find something. A bit of bread. A few leaves. One tiny apple. And every time you find something, you think, just one more day. One more. That is how you survive when nobody farms. Sometimes, you even laugh. Because there's nothing else to do. Like yesterday, when you found a walnut and cracked it open only to discover it was hollow, nothing but a tiny home for a spider. The spider crawled out, looked at you as if to say, "This is my walnut, thank you very much," and then went on its way. You put the shell back in your pocket. It felt symbolic. By the hearth that night, your mother tells you an old saying. Eat what you can, while you can. And if you can't, boil water and call it soup. You laugh. And then you do exactly that. And that's dinner. So tomorrow, you'll wake up again, look at those empty fields, and keep going. Because even when nobody farms, somehow, you find a way not to starve. You wake to the sound of coughing. A dry, hard sound that doesn't belong to you but drifts across the lane like a bad omen. You lie still for a moment, staring up at the brown beams of the roof, and think, how do I stop that sound from coming here? How do I keep it out of my own chest? In this world, there are no doctors, no clean syringes waiting like soldiers in shining armor. What you have, instead, is your body. Your own thin, ordinary body. And today, you start thinking of it as a shield. The first rule of shields. You try to make the surface slippery. So you fetch water. The bucket is heavy, sloshing against your legs as you walk from the stream back to the house. Your arms ache by the time you set it down. You roll up your sleeves. The water is freezing, so cold it burns your fingers, and you splash it over your face and arms, gasping. Does it work? Nobody really knows. But the idea is simple: if you wash enough, maybe the invisible sickness won't stick to you. And so you scrub. Your hands. Your face. Sometimes your hair, even though the water smells faintly of wet moss. You dip a small piece of cloth, wring it out, and rub it along your neck until your skin glows pink. Your fingertips wrinkle and your wrists sting from the cold, but you feel just a little cleaner, and that tiny feeling is enough to steady your heartbeat for a moment. Someone in the village once told you, the plague hates clean people. You don't know if that's true, but you cling to it anyway. Then there are the herbs. If washing is about making the shield smooth, herbs are about painting symbols on it. Your family keeps a little stash of dried leaves, sage, rosemary, mint. You boil them in a pot, leaning over so the steam can wrap itself around your face. The smell is sharp, like a garden caught in a storm. It makes your eyes water, your nose run. And for a few minutes, you can pretend you are breathing something pure. The rosemary you drop into the pot crackles like green wood, and when you close your eyes, you imagine invisible walls going up around you. There is a special bundle hanging by the door, too, wormwood and lavender tied with string. It's supposed to block bad air. The theory goes like this: if you can smell something good, the bad smell, and therefore the sickness, can't get in. Whether or not that works, your house does smell like a strange combination of herbs and smoke, like someone's kitchen and someone's funeral mixed together. Your mother swears by it. She mutters, "Bad air hates good air," as she ties yet another sprig above the door. You even carry a sprig of rosemary in your pocket. Sometimes you take it out, hold it to your nose, and breathe in deep when you pass another person. It feels silly. But it also feels safer. And then there are the charms. Hanging around your neck is the little angel badge you got from the friar. Next to it is a small wooden cross your father carved years ago. Sometimes you add new things: a little pouch filled with salt, a coin that once belonged to your grandmother, a string of dried beads someone swore was touched by a saint. Your chest now jingles softly when you move. Do they protect you? Who knows? But wearing them feels like telling the world, I am trying. Please, don't choose me today. People get creative with protection. You've seen neighbors walk around with scarves tied so tightly over their noses that their voices sound like they're speaking from the bottom of a barrel. One man has a pouch of crushed garlic tied to his belt. The smell is enough to keep even the bravest plague away, or maybe just everyone else. Another swears by nutmeg. He carries one like a talisman, rolling it in his palm as he talks. Nutmeg is rare, but he says the spice is hot and that heat fights illness. You don't argue. Everyone is doing what they can. The more fearful the air grows, the more strange recipes appear. Vinegar sponges, people soak cloth in vinegar and hold it to their noses, convinced that sour air will keep out bad air. Smoke baths, some stand in smoke from burning juniper branches, turning slowly like meat on a spit, as if the smoke will roast the sickness before it can enter. Drinking ground-up emeralds, yes, someone claims this works. It's a terrible waste of an emerald. Feather belts, someone ties feathers around their waist, claiming it confuses the sickness spirits. You've even heard of a truly bizarre one, holding a live chicken under your armpit. Apparently, it's supposed to draw out the sickness. You're not desperate enough for that. Not yet. In your own house, your shield building becomes a daily ritual. In the morning, you wash. Midday, you boil herbs. At night, you burn a pinch of sage on the hearth, letting the smoke curl like little gray ribbons around the room. Your mother whispers a prayer as the herbs crackle. Your father spits into the fire, a habit he says confuses evil spirits. You sit and watch the sparks. Some days you imagine those sparks are little soldiers running to guard your doorway. There's a part of you that knows none of this might matter. But there's also another part, a stubborn part, that says, doing something is better than doing nothing. Even the friar said, God helps those who wash their hands. You don't know if that's scripture or just made up, but it stuck. Every evening, you lie in your straw bed, covered in your rough blanket, and you can still smell the rosemary on your fingers. And you think, I'm still here. One more day. Maybe the shield worked today. You remember how yesterday you saw a family leave their house without these little protections, and today their door is marked with chalk. So yes, you keep believing. Here's a thing historians argue about, did these things help? Some say no, that the herbs, the charms, the baths were just comfort in disguise. Others point out that, by sheer accident, some of these habits, washing, avoiding bad smells, staying away from sick people, might have lowered your chances. It's one of those questions nobody will ever fully settle. Even centuries later, scholars write long arguments about whether these tiny acts, bathing, herbs, charms, were superstition or early medicine. What you do know is that these little rituals give you a rhythm. They give you something to do with your hands when the fear starts buzzing in your head. And in this world, that alone might be enough to keep you standing. One afternoon, as you stand in the sunlight with wet hands and a sprig of mint tucked behind your ear, you look around. At the smoke rising from chimneys. At the herbs hanging from doorways. At the faint jingling of charms on the neighbors who pass you. You think, we all look like a strange, stubborn little army. Each of us carrying our shields. The old woman across the way winks at you, raising her own bundle of herbs like a sword. You almost laugh. And for a second, that makes you smile. Will it work tomorrow? You don't know. But you pull the rosemary from your pocket, breathe deep, and keep going. The bells never wait for you to wake up. They pull you from sleep the way a hook pulls a fish out of water, sudden, unkind, and with no chance to fight back. Dong! It rolls over the thatched roofs. Dong! Across the small lane where your neighbor's geese are still dozing. Dong! Through the fog that clings to the field like an old blanket. By the time the last note dies, you're already sitting up, hair sticking out in every direction, heart beating as if someone has knocked on your own ribs. There was a time when church bells meant something predictable. They told you when to wake up. When to work. When to rest. A rhythm, a comfort, a kind of heartbeat for the whole village. But now? Now they ring for one thing. And it's never good. You pull on your cloak and step outside. There's dew on the grass. The mud squelches under your boots. And in that half-light between night and day, the village feels like it's holding its breath. The door to your neighbor's house is shut. It was open yesterday. And the chalk cross you didn't notice before, it's there now, faint and pale as a ghost. Another bell strike. This one feels closer. You start walking toward the sound. The church sits on a small rise at the center of the village, its stone walls rough and patched in places with wood where the masonry gave out. It's not a grand cathedral, it's more like a tired, elderly shepherd that's been standing guard over this place for generations. The bells hang in a crooked tower that always looks one good windstorm away from collapsing. And still, every day, they ring. When you arrive, the churchyard is already crowded. People stand in clusters, careful not to brush sleeves. It's a strange dance, everyone close enough to hear the prayers, far enough not to breathe the same air. Children cling to their mothers. Old men sit on stones because their knees can't hold them up anymore. And up on the steps, the priest raises his arms. "Pray, my children," he says. "Pray, for the Lord sees us in this trial. He tests our hearts and he hears every word." His voice is tired. You can hear it, the way his words sag at the ends. You kneel. Not because you believe every word. But because when everyone else is on their knees, it feels wrong to stay standing. The prayers begin. They're not quiet. They rise up like smoke, a murmuring chorus that blends into a single sound. Some people speak in Latin, the words half remembered from the last time they went to Mass. Most pray in plain speech, stumbling, whispering bargains into the air. You pray, too. Not in long, perfect sentences. Just, please. Not me. Not my family. Not today. It smells of wax and earth here. Of sweat and fear. Inside the church, candles flicker along the walls, their tiny flames bowing every time a draft sneaks through the wooden door. The altar is simple, rough wood, a linen cloth, a cross carved by someone whose hands were used to plows, not chisels. There is a basket of coins and bread left as offerings, small gifts from people who don't have much to give. You watch as a woman steps forward, sets down an egg, and whispers something so softly that only the stone floor hears her. A man behind her presses a loaf of bread to his forehead before leaving it at the altar. It's as if these gifts are small shields, pieces of themselves they're giving up in exchange for mercy. The bells strike again. You jump a little. This time it's not the call to gather. It's the announcement of another passing. The priest bows his head. Someone starts to cry. You look at the floor. In the days since the plague came, the church has become a place of constant sound. Bells for the dead. Bells for the living. Bells for anyone still strong enough to listen. And even when you go home, their echo follows you. It's in the fields. It's in your dreams. Sometimes you wonder if the bells will keep ringing long after everyone has gone, as if they don't know how to stop. There's an old woman who says the bells themselves are a medicine. The sound drives away the sickness, she tells anyone who will listen. So she sits as close to the church as she can, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes closed, breathing the sound in like it's a warm loaf of bread. You hope she's right. Historians still argue about this, you know. Not about the bells, that part's easy to confirm. But about how much people believed these prayers could truly help. Some say the villagers clung to church because it was the only structure left standing when everything else fell apart. Others say that faith itself was the cure for despair, if not for the sickness. And then there are those who believe that these gatherings only spread the plague further. The truth? It's probably a mix of all three. Back in the churchyard, the priest dips his hand in a bowl of water. It's not holy water anymore. It's just water. There's no time to bless it, no fresh supply, but still he sprinkles it on anyone who kneels close enough, tracing the sign of the cross in the air. When he reaches you, the droplets are cold on your forehead. You close your eyes. For a moment, you let yourself believe the droplets are a shield. The prayers go on. And you find your gaze wandering over the stained glass window, small, uneven, nothing like the ones in the cities. The glass is colored with cheap dyes, but when the sunlight hits it just right, it makes a patch of blue on the wall so bright you almost forget everything else. You stare at it until your knees ache and the blue patch fades with the moving sun. The bells ring again. Dong. This time, you don't flinch. In the weeks that follow, you hear the bells so often that you start to measure time by them instead of the sun. There is the bell that means someone has died. The bell that means everyone must come pray. The bell that means the priest has collapsed and someone else is pulling the rope. One night, half asleep, you imagine the bells talking to each other. One bell says, another one gone. The other says, another prayer heard. And the two of them keep arguing until dawn. But the thing about bells is, they remind you that someone is still alive to ring them. And as long as there's a sound, as long as the rope swings, the village hasn't fallen completely silent. After the prayers, people shuffle home. Their faces are drawn, their hands raw from the cold, but there's a softness in their steps, as if, for a little while, the bells have scrubbed some of the fear out of their bones. You follow, listening to the last faint notes. And you think, maybe that's what the bells are really for. Not to keep the sickness out, but to keep despair from moving in. That night, as you lie on your straw mattress, the sound drifts over the dark fields again. And, against all reason, you feel safer. The bells keep watch. No one is coming. That is the first truth you face, standing in the doorway of your house with the wind slipping cold fingers through the cracks. In another life, in a world of stories and painted manuscripts, there would be a doctor on horseback. He would ride in from the city with a leather satchel and clever hands. He would nod gravely, examine everyone, and leave behind small, tidy solutions like crumbs on a table. But this is not that world. The truth is simpler, there is no doctor for miles. The few that once came through these lanes have vanished, swallowed by fear or by the plague itself. The city doors are closed. The paths are empty. You are on your own. So, when the coughing grows too strong in your neighbor's house, or when your own skin feels hot as if there's a tiny forge under it, you don't wait for a physician. You go to see her. She lives at the far end of the village, in a little cottage that seems to grow out of the earth rather than stand on it. The walls are leaning, covered in ivy like green lace. There is always a smell of drying herbs, of smoke, and sometimes of onions. Children whisper that she talks to plants. Adults, when they think no one is listening, say she knows enough to be dangerous. Her name? Well, everyone just calls her Old Nan. Old Nan is not a doctor. She will be the first to tell you that, squinting at you with eyes the color of wet pebbles. No doctor, me. Never seen a book in my life. But a leaf talks if you know how to listen. And so, in the absence of books and training in medicine, you listen to the leaves with her. Her house is strange. Bundles of dried plants hang from the ceiling, brushing against your hair when you duck inside. The hearth is always lit, and a blackened pot bubbles away with something that looks like swamp water and smells like hope. Her table is covered in little piles, crushed bark, honeycomb, garlic bulbs, and cloth-wrapped powders that make you sneeze just by looking at them. When you sit down, she doesn't ask what hurts. She just looks at you. Looks at your face, your hands, the way you hold yourself. Then she nods as if she has seen the answer already. For a cough, she gives you a potion of thyme and honey, thick and warm, that coats your throat like a blanket. For fever, she presses a rag soaked in vinegar and rosewater against your forehead. Cool your head, not your feet, she mutters, as if that makes sense. For stomach trouble, she boils peppermint and nettle until the whole room smells like a garden after rain. And for fear, because that is the biggest sickness of all, she just gives you something to hold. A walnut. A small charm made from bone. Something to turn over in your hand when the nights stretch too long. You learn quickly that you are not the only one. Every day, there's a quiet line outside Old Nan's house. A boy with a limp. A woman with a sick baby, her eyes rimmed red from crying. An old man who can't sleep for the ache in his bones. No one has much to give her. So they bring what they can, a piece of bread, a sliver of cheese, sometimes a single egg. Her table becomes a strange mix of charity and desperation. There is a kind of barter here, not for money, but for comfort. Old Nan has a little notebook of sorts, not with ink and quill, but in her mind. She remembers everyone's cough, everyone's worry. She remembers the way you hold your cup and the way your neighbor presses his hand to his chest when he breathes. She remembers everything. And while you might laugh at the strange things she asks you to do, tie a pouch of sage around your neck. Burn rosemary on a Wednesday. Boil onion skins in water and drink it warm. You still do them. Because when there's no doctor, even the smallest ritual feels like a plan. Once, you ask her why there are no doctors. She spits into the fire. The good ones died first, she says. The brave ones followed. And the rest, well, they stayed in their houses and locked the door. Can't say I blame M. Her voice is not bitter. It's just a fact. So the knowledge of how to survive becomes a web, stretched from house to house. What old Nan knows, she teaches. And what she doesn't, people invent. That's how you learn about garlic. You crush it, mix it with a little butter, if you have any, and smear it on bread. They say it keeps the plague out. Does it? Historians will argue about this for centuries, but in the meantime, the whole village smells like a giant stew. You also hear of onion magic, cut one in half and leave it by the window. The onion, apparently, drinks in the bad air. It is a funny sight, walking through the lanes and seeing every windowsill lined with half onions, like the village is planning a grand onion feast. From one neighbor, you learn to chew on juniper berries. From another, to carry a little cloth bag of salt in your pocket. Every scrap of advice becomes a piece of armor. There's an art to listening in this new world. You stand close, but not too close, and you pay attention to the little pieces of knowledge that pass like breadcrumbs. Boil nettle with honey. Use willow bark for pain. If you can, keep walking, don't sit too long, or the sickness sits with you. Some of these things make sense, in a way you can't explain. Others just make you shake your head. Like the man who swears that tying a frog to your wrist cures fever. Or the one who claims that drinking ale with crushed oyster shells makes you too slippery for death to catch. You laugh. But you also wonder if, just maybe, that man is still alive for a reason. And because there are no doctors, you learn to do everything slowly. You learn to take your time with someone who is ill, to sit with them even when you can't fix it. You learn to watch for small changes, a little color in their cheeks, or the way they start to breathe more easily after days of struggle. Old Nan teaches you how to make a poultice. You mash herbs and bread together, wrap it in a cloth, and press it against an infected cut. It smells terrible. It looks worse. But somehow, now and then, it works. She also shows you how to make plasters of honey and lard to soothe cracked skin, and how to stuff dried moss into your shoes to keep the cold from creeping up your legs. Little things, but they feel like spells. Sometimes, when you leave her house, you hear the bells of the church again. And you think, it's strange. There's no doctor, but there is this. There's an old woman and her leaves. And that will have to do. Historians today still wonder about people like Old Nan. Some say they were just keepers of superstition, spreading nonsense in the name of comfort. Others argue they were the first, quiet threads of medicine, the fragile bridge between faith and science. For you, she is neither and both. She is the one who hands you a jar of thyme, looks you straight in the eye, and says, "You are going to be all right. Now, go home and boil this." And you believe her. That night, when you sit by the fire stirring the jar into a pot, you can almost believe that no doctor is needed. Almost. Because, for a moment, the whole house smells like something healing. And for a little while, that is enough. In the absence of doctors, you become a little doctor yourself. You remember everything old Nan told you. You repeat it to others. And in this way, the web grows. From one voice to another, from one kitchen to the next. By the end of the week, you realize something. There may not be a doctor for miles, but there are dozens of hands, dozens of small acts of care, dozens of people learning how to survive together. And that might be just as powerful. Not the bells this time, thankfully. This time, it's the jangle of something metal, the creak of cart wheels, the thin call of a voice you don't recognize drifting through the misty lane. Good folks. Good cures. Don't let the plague take you. You glance up from where you are stacking sticks outside your house. For a moment you think, doctors. But no, of course not. The real ones are gone. These are other kinds of healers. They arrive like a traveling circus, all noise and color in a place that has forgotten both. The first thing you notice is their clothing. Bright cloaks, red hats, feathers pinned at strange angles. You wonder if the colors are meant to scare away the plague, or just make you forget it for a moment. Behind them, a cart rattles, painted with faded patterns of stars and suns. You catch a glimpse of glass bottles inside, reflecting little bursts of light like pieces of treasure. The villagers gather in a slow circle. Everyone is wary, but no one turns away. When you have no doctor for miles, even a stranger with a feather in his cap becomes a small candle in a dark room. The man who speaks the loudest is tall, with a face tanned like old leather. He holds up a stick with bells tied to it, and shakes it so the sound carries over the crowd. Ladies and lads, he calls out. We bring charms, we bring powders, we bring the secrets of every city. The words sound big. The promise is even bigger. Next to him is a woman with long braids wrapped in ribbons. She carries a small drum and taps it with her fingers as she moves, a slow, steady beat that feels like a second heartbeat in your ears. Behind them, a boy, no older than 12, hauls a basket of things that clink and clatter. And at the back, almost hidden, there's a figure in a beaked mask. The sight of that mask makes the crowd step back all at once. You've heard of these plague masks. In the big cities, they say doctors wear them, the beak stuffed with herbs to keep out the foul air. But here, in your small village, the sight is almost like a ghost come to life. The mask bearer does not speak. He only watches. The loud man begins to show his wares. He pulls out a bottle filled with something golden and holds it high so the sunlight sets it glowing. This, he says, is the very essence of safety. Golden vinegar. Bathe your doors with it, and no death shall enter. He uncorks it with a flourish, and the sharp scent hits you even from where you stand. Is it special? Or just vinegar with a pinch of honey? You can't tell. Next, the ribbon-haired woman opens a little box. Inside are charms, tiny figures carved from wood, stones polished smooth, feathers tied together with thread. For your neck, she says. For your heart. To keep the sickness from finding its way to your house. A neighbor steps forward, holding out a coin. The woman loops a charm over his head, whispers something you can't hear, and gives him a pat on the shoulder. His face softens, just a little. Then come the rituals. Bring out your sick, the loud man calls. No one moves at first. But after a long, tense silence, a mother steps forward with her little girl. The girl's cheeks are flushed. She looks too tired even to cry. The man motions them to sit. He pulls out a bundle of herbs, sage, rosemary, juniper, and holds it over a small brazier. Smoke curls upward, smelling of burnt leaves. With his bell stick, he waves the smoke around the girl, murmuring words that sound like half prayer, half song. The woman with the drum joins in, her rhythm slow and hypnotic. The masked figure stands behind them, silent, holding a pouch that spills a fine, white powder onto the ground in a circle around the child. It looks strange. It looks like theater. But the mother watches with desperate eyes, and the rest of the village watches her. For a few minutes, the sickness feels smaller. When the ritual is done, the loud man places a cloth around the girl's shoulders. She will need rest, he says solemnly. But now the foul air has been pushed away. The mother clutches the cloth like a treasure. You can't help it. You lean toward your neighbor and whisper. Does it work? He shrugs. I don't know. But she smiled for the first time in a week. And you think, maybe that's worth a coin. Not everything they do is gentle. Sometimes they bring out leeches, kept in a small jar of cloudy water. Let them drink out the bad humors, they say, as if the sickness is something you can simply pour out like water from a bucket. You shiver, watching a man grimace as the little black shapes cling to his arm. Other times, they mix powders. Charcoal ground with honey. Garlic smashed with salt. A liquid that smells like wine left too long in the sun. They smear these on wounds, or press them into hands with a firm drink. Some people get better. Some don't. There's also a trick they do with music. At night, when the fires burn low, the ribbon-haired woman takes out a strange stringed instrument. The sound it makes is soft and trembling, like a bird trying to fly through mist. She plays as the others hum, and for a while, everyone just listens. And you think, even if this isn't a cure, it's a kind of medicine all the same. Historians have a lot to say about these wandering healers. Some call them charlatans, traveling with colorful cloaks to trade false hope for bread. Others say they kept entire villages from collapsing, not because they had cures, but because they gave people something to hold on to. Even now, there's debate. In the moment, though, you are not a historian. You are just a villager, standing in the thin winter sunlight, watching a small crowd gather around a man with a feather in his hat, because it feels like he has carried a piece of the outside world here in his cart. You wonder where they will go next. To the next village, probably. And the next, until the wheels of their cart wear down to splinters. Before they leave, you find yourself reaching for one of the little charms. It's nothing fancy, just a smooth stone with a hole worn through the center, tied to a cord. You pay with half a loaf of bread. The ribbon-haired woman ties it around your wrist and says, "This stone has seen the sea. It knows how to keep waves away. Let it keep the plague away too." You almost laugh. But you don't. That night, lying in bed, you turn the stone over and over in your fingers. The bells ring. And for the first time in weeks, the sound doesn't feel so heavy. When morning comes, the healers are gone. The cart tracks fade into the mud. But the scent of burned herbs lingers in the lane like a ghost, and for a moment you imagine them still there, shaking their bells, playing their strange music. And for some reason, you sit up a little straighter. You always thought your village was open like the sky. There were no gates. No walls. Just a dusty track winding in and out, and the field spreading like a patchwork quilt. If someone came walking in, whether it was a shepherd, a monk, or a peddler with tin spoons, they were greeted with bread and a bit of gossip. That was before. Now, everything that moves on that road looks like a shadow, and every shadow looks like trouble. It starts small. Someone drags a log into the road one morning. Not because they planned it, just because there was an empty tree trunk lying around and fear makes people creative. A thin fog rolls across the fields, and when a stranger comes walking down the lane, they stop short, staring at the trunk. They cough into their sleeve. They don't step over it. They turn around. And suddenly, that single tree trunk feels like a miracle. By the end of the day there are 3 logs. By the end of the week, 5. You are there when the grown-ups say, "That's it. We close the way. No more letting the road stay open. We can't risk it." There's no big speech. No lord to give the order. Just everyone standing in a circle, looking at one another, knowing deep in their bones what needs to be done. So you all go into the forest together. The air smells of pine and wet bark as you and the others pull branches loose. The children find the smallest ones and drag them like they're hauling dragons by the tail. The men and women take the heavy trunks, rolling them with a grunt, mud streaking up to their knees. Someone ties a rope around a fat log, and 10 people pull at once. There is no art to it. Just strength, and a determination that is heavier than the wood. Back on the road, you set the logs down in a wide X, then a second X, and a third. Like a giant has thrown a handful of sticks across the lane. And just like that, the main road to the village is gone. Of course, you know the plague doesn't care about logs. It's not as if the sickness will bump its invisible head and say, "Oh, sorry," and turn back. But the logs do something else. They tell other people, "Don't come closer." And that, right now, is half the battle. The next day, a peddler appears, leading a donkey piled with tin pans. He sees the blockade and shouts, "I've got combs. Needles. Pepper." No one answers. The man stands there, scratching his beard, looking up at the church tower in the distance. Then he sighs, turns the donkey around, and trudges back the way he came. You watch from the safety of a hedge, your breath caught in your throat. And for a moment you feel both relief and guilt. The fortress grows. The fence that once circled the cow pasture is pulled down and hammered into a barrier along the northern edge. The women gather thorny brambles from the hedgerows, carrying armfuls of spikes that scratch their arms raw. The boys, because boys can't resist mischief, drag a whole cart of nettles, dumping them into a messy pile like some kind of stinging sea monster. And then someone says, "We need a wall. Not a big one. Not stone like in a city. Just mud." So you fetch shovels, buckets, even old cooking pots. The mud is heavy, sticking to your fingers, squishing under your boots. You slap it against the wooden fence, smoothing it with your palms. Bit by bit, the wall rises, ugly and lopsided but solid. By the time the wind dries it, the wall has become the mud dragon. A little boy names it first. He climbs up and runs along the top with his arms stretched like wings. "Look, I'm the dragon," he shouts. Someone laughs. Then someone else. The sound is so strange, so rare these days that everyone stops for a moment just to enjoy it. When the work is done, you step back. It doesn't look like a castle. It looks like something a bunch of farmers built with their own hands because they had nothing else to build with. And yet, when you stand behind it, it feels like safety. From then on, the village changes. You set up watches at every corner. Not soldiers, just people. A boy with a stick. A woman with a broom. An old man who can't do much but sit on a stool and squint at the road. When someone approaches, they stop you long before you can get close. "Stay there. What do you want?" You talk across the mud and logs, your voice is bouncing off the walls. If the stranger asks for bread, you tie it to a stick and pass it over without ever letting them near. If they ask to come in, you shake your head. No. It's not safe. You hate it. Everything in you wants to help. But fear has built something taller than the mud wall, a wall inside your chest. One afternoon, a man arrives. Thin as a scarecrow, his donkey carrying nothing but a single sack. He coughs as he walks, leaning on the animal. He begs to be let in. "Please, just water. Please, just a corner of the barn." And for a moment, everyone hesitates. You can feel it, the pull between mercy and survival. Then the church bell rings, and the decision is made. No. You watch as the man turns away, his back bent, his donkey plodding behind. That night, you dream of him. The fortress makes everything smaller. Where you once walked freely into the woods, now you count every step. The fields are still there, but the world has shrunk to a circle. Inside, a handful of houses, a church, and the people you know. Outside, uncertainty. Even when someone from your own village has to leave, to fetch grain, or to see if a cousin is still alive, you keep a waiting hut ready for them when they come back. It's nothing more than a shed near the edge of the fields, but they sleep there for 2 or 3 nights before being allowed back in. Just in case. You call it the quiet house. It smells of hay, and sometimes the wind whips through the cracks, but no one complains. Sometimes, from the top of the mud dragon, you look out at the road. You wonder if the world beyond is emptier now, or if life goes on out there, just as it does in here, with walls of their own. Historians will one day give this a word: quarantine. They will study the ditches and the logs and the brambles and argue about whether they worked. Did they stop the plague? Did they just slow it? Or was it nothing more than a comfort, a line drawn in the dirt to make frightened people feel a little less helpless? Even now, no one agrees. But standing there, with mud drying on your hands and the logs creaking in the wind, you realize something. You didn't build the wall to keep out the sickness. You built it so you could breathe. You built it so you could believe, for just a little while, that there was still a place left where the world couldn't touch you. And at night, when the wind rattles the shutters and the bells toll in some faraway church, you pull your blanket tighter and think. Thank goodness for the mud dragon. Thank goodness for every log and every bramble. Because sometimes, the only thing between you and fear is the wall you built together. At first, you don't notice it. The changes are small, little ripples across the surface of a pond you thought was still. A shorter hello. A glance that slides away instead of meeting your eyes. A hand that doesn't reach out like it used to. And then, one day, you realize something you never thought you'd feel in your tiny village: your friends are turning into strangers. The thing about fear is that it makes the space between people bigger than any wall or ditch. The mud dragon can keep strangers out, yes, but inside the wall there is another kind of separation, invisible, creeping into the spaces where laughter used to live. Take Thomas, for instance. He used to come by every morning, without even knocking, just wander in and help himself to whatever bread you had lying around. Sometimes he'd bring a jug of cider, sometimes nothing but his voice, and that was fine. You'd talk about the weather, the fields, which rooster sounded the most ridiculous that week. Now, you see him across the lane and he nods, once. Doesn't come closer. Doesn't sit at your table anymore. You want to call out, but you don't. Because if you call him closer, what if he thinks you're trying to kill him with kindness? The first time you notice it really sinking in is at the well. There's a new rule of distance. One person draws water at a time. Everyone else stands back, farther back than necessary, like the air itself has teeth. When it's your turn, you wrap your hands around the cold rope, pull up the bucket, and you can feel all the eyes watching, waiting for you to step away so they can rush in and do the same, fast, before you've touched anything else. No one says much. It used to be that the well was the gossip center. Now, it's just silence and the sound of the rope creaking. You don't blame them. You do the same. It happens in the fields, too. When you go to weed, you realize the workers no longer stand close enough to pass a tool. Everyone brings their own hoe, their own basket. And if someone sneezes, just once, heads whip around so fast it looks like a flock of startled geese. The strangest part. Even family does it. You find yourself keeping a little distance from your aunt, even though she practically raised you. You notice she wipes the handle of the door after you touch it. She notices you do the same when it's her turn. Neither of you mentions it, but it hangs in the air like a fog. And the worst? Children learn it faster than anyone. The games they used to play in great noisy clusters, tag, stick fighting, spinning until you fall down laughing, are all smaller now. Groups of 3 or 4. Sometimes just one, alone, kicking a pebble down the lane because no one wants to get too close. You remember the first time a hug disappears. It's one of those cold evenings, the wind sharp as needles. You run into your best friend on the path, someone you haven't seen for days. You want to throw your arms around them, feel the weight of a real hug. But you both stop short, like two deer frozen in a clearing. And instead, you nod. That's all. A nod. The moment passes, and you walk away, each of you pretending that's enough. And then come the arguments. Little things, at first. You went to the edge of the forest yesterday, didn't you? Who did you talk to there? You should wash your hands before you come near. Maybe you shouldn't bring that bread. Who knows where the flour came from? Words you never thought you'd hear from friends. A strange kind of suspicion starts to grow. You catch yourself thinking. Did he just cough because of dust? Why did she go quiet so suddenly? Is it safe to share that cup? You don't say these thoughts out loud. But they sit in your chest like heavy stones. The church bells ring, and people file inside, but now the benches are empty between each family. You sit, and the person who used to sit right next to you now chooses a bench 3 rows back. Prayers echo louder because of all the gaps. Historians, centuries later, will say, social bonds broke down during the plague. Fear isolated people. They will debate why. Was it the belief in bad air, that the sickness clung to breath like a shadow? Was it divine punishment, the thought that being near someone sinful might bring punishment down on you too? Or was it just plain survival instinct, a wall of instinct no mind can talk itself over? No one really knows. Even now, scholars argue. But you, living it, you don't have the luxury of arguing. You just watch the way faces turn cautious. Sometimes, you dream of the before times. Before the bells. Before the walls. When a knock at the door was a good thing, not a warning. And yet, here's the strangest part. Even though people avoid each other, there's still a thread connecting you all. It's just quieter. Like the time you leave a small bundle of onions on Thomas's doorstep, even though you don't dare knock. Or when you wake up to find a loaf of bread left outside your own house, still warm, with no note. No words. No thanks. But someone out there thought of you. That's the new version of friendship, kindness at arm's length. Sometimes, in the blue dusk, you see two friends standing far apart, talking with their hands instead of their feet. Gestures, waves, faces pulling exaggerated expressions, like mimes. The laughter still comes, it just comes with distance. One day, there's a wedding. A small one, held quietly in the church because the families insisted. There are only 10 people inside. When it comes time to congratulate the bride and groom, no one kisses their cheeks. They just press their hands to their own chests and bow, smiling with their eyes. And you think, even joy has to wear a mask now. Weeks pass, and you start to notice how your world has learned a new dance. 2 steps back. 1 step forward. Eyes scanning the air, the ground, the space between. There's an odd comfort to it, eventually. You get used to waving instead of touching, to speaking across a distance. And when you do meet someone's eyes, really meet them, it feels like more than it used to, like the look itself is a hug you can't risk giving. Still, you can't help missing what it was like before everyone became a stranger. The easy leaning against a doorframe, the shared cup of ale, the unthinking closeness that came so naturally you never noticed it until it was gone. You lie awake sometimes and wonder. When this is over, if it ever ends, will you all know how to be close again? Will a handshake feel normal, or will it always feel dangerous? Will the old jokes come back, or will there always be a little hesitation behind them? But for now, in this moment, you live with what you have. Nods from across the lane. Loaves of bread left on doorsteps. And the quiet hope that one day, strangers will turn back into friends again. By the time you get to this part of the story, coins feel like they belong to another world. There are a few tucked away in wooden boxes, maybe, but no one trusts them. Who wants silver when what you need is onions? Who cares about gold if there is no bread? So, in your little corner of the world, you begin to trade in chickens, jars, and promises. It begins with the simplest thing, a hen. You watch her scratching at the mud outside your door, pecking at anything that moves. She's scrawny, and you've named her, though you'd never admit it to anyone because naming makes trading harder. But there comes a day when she is no longer just a hen. She becomes your currency. There's a man in the next hamlet, a man with a bundle of herbs slung over his back. He has rosemary, sage, thyme, things that smell like hope when you crush them between your fingers. You don't have coins, so you carry the chicken in your arms all the way down the lane. The man eyes her critically. She's a thin one, he says. She lays, you answer. He strokes his beard, then shrugs and hands over a small bag of leaves tied up with a scrap of string. A chicken for a bundle of herbs. And just like that, the deal is done. Back in the village, the news spreads. People start bringing what little they have. A jar of honey traded for a bit of garlic. A loaf of barley bread swapped for a ribbon charm blessed by a traveling healer. A pile of nuts for a scrap of cloth someone swears can be tied to a doorpost to keep the plague out. You once thought a market needed stalls, tables, and shouting. Now, the market is a circle on the ground, a patch of flattened grass where people sit a careful distance from one another, their goods spread out in front of them. There's no shouting. Only soft voices. Every deal feels like something done in a dream, quiet, cautious, important. Sometimes the trades seem fair. Sometimes they don't. You've seen someone give away half a jar of honey for a simple charm carved from wood. You know it's just a bit of wood. But the look on their face as they tie it to their wrist, that look says the trade was worth it. Because sometimes you're not buying the charm. You're buying hope. One day, you bring your own honey to the circle. It's thick and golden, saved from the hives your uncle kept at the edge of the orchard. You cradle it like treasure. You sit. You wait. Soon, someone comes up, a neighbor with tired eyes, and offers you a handful of dried lavender. She says, it keeps the bad smells away. Bad smells bring the sickness. Does lavender stop the plague? You doubt it. Do you take it anyway? Of course you do. Because, like everyone else, you need to believe in something. Sometimes, the trades get stranger. A boy trades a goat bell for a single onion. A girl offers a poem, written on a scrap of parchment, in exchange for a loaf of bread. No one laughs at her. Because when the nights are this long, a poem is as valuable as an onion. One afternoon, a traveling healer comes back, the same one with the cart full of herbs and charms. This time, he doesn't ask for coins at all. He points at a crate of chickens near the circle. 2 of those, he says, and I'll give you enough herbs to last a month. You hear someone whisper, that's robbery. But then the deal happens anyway. 2 chickens for a bundle of leaves. Because, again, what else can you do? You learn to watch for signs of desperation in these trades. Someone who offers their last blanket for a pinch of salt. Someone who trades their only pair of boots for a vial of vinegar. Someone who hands over a small sack of grain just to be given a prayer murmured over their child's head. It's not a fair exchange, but who dares say no? And there are the moments that feel, somehow, kind. Like the time you bring a single egg, just one, and leave with a handful of dried berries. The man who gives them to you shakes his head when you try to offer something more. Take them, he says. I had a good year before all this. Or when you trade a jar of honey to an old woman, and she presses an extra sprig of thyme into your hand, whispering, keep it in your pocket. It might make you brave. Historians, long after all of this, will look back at these little trades and say they were economies of survival. They will write about how barter came back to life in the plague years, about how goods were measured not by weight or coin, but by need and fear. Some will argue that these trades made sense. Others will argue they were all superstition. But none of those historians will ever stand where you do, holding a jar of honey in your cold hands and wondering how much hope you can afford today. The strangest thing about this market is the way value changes. Before, you thought of a chicken as just dinner. Now, it's a doctor. A charm. A way to get someone to look at your sick cousin without turning away. One of the most memorable trades happens late in the season, when the frost is beginning to creep into the mornings. You have nothing left to give but a rooster. You walk to the circle, holding him under your arm, his feathers puffed up against the cold. Across from you is a woman with a little bundle of cloth. Inside it, she says, is a mixture of crushed rose petals and vinegar, to wash your hands with. Does it work? Probably not. Does it smell better than anything else in your house? Yes. So you hand over the rooster, and she gives you the bundle. As you walk home, you untie it and breathe in the scent, and for the first time all week, the air doesn't feel like death. You begin to realize something important. Trading isn't just about objects. It's about connection. Every exchange, even the smallest, ties you to someone else, reminds you that you are not completely alone. Of course, there are also people who take advantage. The sly ones who whisper about secret cures. The ones who ask for 3 chickens and a loaf of bread in exchange for a blessing. You watch them and feel a flicker of anger. But you also understand. Fear is the richest soil for deception. There's a saying that grows in your village. Hope costs a chicken. And everyone nods when they say it, because it's true. One evening, after a long day of bartering, you sit at your table, counting what's left. Half a loaf. A sprig of rosemary. A charm carved from a bit of bone. You run your fingers over the charm's surface, and for a moment you imagine it's warm. And you think, maybe, just maybe, it was worth it. Because in a time when the bells never stop and the walls keep closing in, sometimes a chicken isn't just a chicken. It's a piece of hope with feathers on it. Night falls differently now. Before the sickness came, nighttime in your village was just a practical thing. The sun dipped below the hills, the fields dimmed into gray, and you went home. Maybe you'd sit by the fire, maybe you'd talk to a neighbor leaning against the doorframe, maybe you'd hear a fiddler tune somewhere down the lane. But these days, when the sky turns dark, fear comes with it. And fear, if you let it sit in your chest, makes the hours stretch so long they feel like a second lifetime. One evening, you lie on your bed, staring up at the wooden beams of the ceiling. The air is so still you can hear the soft creak of the rafters, and even your own heartbeat sounds loud. That's when it begins, a voice. At first, you think you're imagining it. A woman's voice, low and slow, like a thread of light in the dark. It's coming from somewhere down the lane. You press your ear to the shutter. The song isn't fancy. It's not even a full melody, just a few notes, swaying back and forth like a cradle rocking. Sleep now, little one, it goes. Sleep now, the sun will come. You know that tune. Your grandmother used to hum it while kneading bread. And there, in the quiet, you realize she's not singing for a child. She's singing for all of you. The next night, you hear it again. Not just her this time. 2 voices, then 3, joining softly. By the time a week has passed, it's become a habit, night falls, and the songs begin. Some sing to remember. Old ballads about saints and kings, about rivers and orchards. Songs that carry them back to times when life was as simple as the weather. Others make up new verses on the spot. Lines about muddy fields, about the stubborn rooster that crows at the wrong time, about how the bells in the church tower have rung so much that even the pigeons look annoyed. There's laughter hidden in those words. A way of teasing fear until it loosens its grip. You join in one night. At first, you're shy. Your voice feels small, like a pebble tossed into a river. But then the sound swells around you, and your voice blends with theirs, and suddenly it's not about being good. It's about being there. You sing because everyone else is singing, and because silence feels like giving up. The historians of the future will have very serious names for this. communal coping mechanisms and oral traditions of resilience. They will write books about how villages like yours used song as a shield, about how rhythm and rhyme stitched people together. But living it, you don't think in those terms. You just know that singing makes the night shorter. There's a boy who plays the pipe, too. He stands at the edge of the lane, his cheeks puffed, his eyes closed, and lets the notes wander into the dark. It isn't perfect. Sometimes he squeaks, and someone calls out, "That note was flatter than our barn roof." But even the teasing is part of the music. One night, someone starts a new verse. Good bread on the table. Safe walls all around. No sickness can find me. When I hear this sound, it catches on like a spark. By the end of the night, even the shyest voices are singing it, loud enough to echo against the trees. Some songs are quiet prayers. No one writes them down, but they sound like this. Keep us safe, keep us warm. Hold our hands through every storm. Let the morning find us here, far away from death and fear. You don't have to believe in anything particular to sing it. You just let the words carry you like a boat. It doesn't stop the sickness. Of course it doesn't. But on nights when the air feels heavy and the church bells have rung too many times, the songs become a soft wall between you and the dark. Sometimes, when someone dies, the songs change. You all gather, spread out now, keeping your careful distance, but the voices still come together. There's no priestly Latin this time. It's just the tune, old as the hills. Go where the sun is. Go where the rain ends. Go where the fields stay green forever. And as you sing, you can almost see it, a place with no fear, no cold, no mud walls. Just fields and light. In a way, the village itself becomes a choir. Even if you're alone in your house, you hear it, one voice from the west side, another from the fields, another faint through the closed shutters of the quiet house. They don't line up perfectly. Sometimes someone starts a verse too early, sometimes too late. But the unevenness makes it beautiful. It sounds like life. And the children? They invent their own nonsense songs. Little ditties about frogs wearing boots, or about chickens learning to fly, or about a donkey that kicks the plague so hard it flies away over the hills. You catch yourself humming those tunes while mending a torn sleeve, and realize you're smiling without meaning to. You notice something else. When people are singing, fear changes shape. It doesn't go away, but it gets smaller, like a shadow that shrinks when you hold up a lantern. There are even some brave souls who dance. Just a little, 1 or 2 steps, careful not to bump into anyone else. A turn of the hand, a sway of the shoulders. They say, if the sickness comes, at least it won't catch me standing still. One evening, you sit outside, wrapped in a blanket, while a thin moon rises above the trees. The songs rise, soft at first, then louder. You look at the other houses, their shutters closed, faint candlelight glowing from the cracks, and you imagine the faces behind them, tired, worried, but still here. Still singing. And you think, even if tomorrow brings another round of bells, tonight, the music has made the world feel a little wider again. Weeks pass, and the habit sticks. Even on nights when there is nothing new to mourn, when the fear is a little less sharp, someone starts a tune. It has become a way of measuring time. Morning, the crows. Evening, the bells. Night, the singing. Scholars will argue for years about whether these songs ever made a real difference. Some say yes, singing calmed people, made them braver, kept panic from destroying everything. Others say no, it was just noise in the dark. But you know, without needing a scholar to tell you. On those nights, in that place, the singing saved you in ways no medicine ever could. Sometimes, the songs are just for yourself. You hum while kneeling in the dirt, pulling weeds. You hum while scrubbing the door handle, while trying to wash your hands in water that's far too cold. You hum when you're alone because the sound makes it feel like you aren't. And you notice your heartbeat slows. The fear doesn't leave completely. It probably never will. But when you sing, when all of you sing, it feels like, for a few minutes, the world forgets to be cruel. And that's enough to sleep a little easier. The strangest thing, when everything feels like it has stopped, is discovering that the seasons never do. Even when the world feels as though it's holding its breath. The earth under your bare feet keeps moving forward, quietly, stubbornly. You notice it first in spring. After a winter that felt endless, the frost finally lets go of the soil. The ground softens under your boots, and the air has that faint green smell again, the one you almost forgot existed. You wake one morning to find a single white flower pushing through the dirt beside the wall. It looks so small, so fragile. And yet it stands there as if it doesn't know what fear is. People start to whisper. Do you think things will be better when the flowers come back? You don't answer out loud. But you let yourself hope for half a second that maybe they will. Of course, spring doesn't bring miracles. The bells still ring, the sickness still lingers. But the light feels different. The trees burst into bloom like they've been waiting all year for this moment. The bees come back, drunk on flowers, bumping into each other in the air. And for a while, you almost remember what normal life felt like. There's work to do, of course. Plague or no plague, a field left alone will grow weeds faster than anything else. So you pull on your boots and take your hoe out to the land. The soil clumps in your hands, warm from the sun. You plant seeds, barley, rye, beans, your fingers deep in the earth, as if you're burying not just food but a promise that tomorrow might still exist. When the rain comes, it's a relief. You stand under the eaves and listen as the drops drum on the roof, washing the dust from the leaves. The sound is soft, but it makes the world feel clean for a while. Then, summer. Heat rolls in like an unwelcome guest, thick and heavy. The roads bake to a pale crust, and even the chickens walk slower. The fields grow tall. Grain bends in the breeze like gold hair. And the air buzzes with the sound of flies and cicadas. In the heat of summer, the smells of life and death mix. The plague doesn't pause for the sun. But the world refuses to be all sorrow. You can smell hay drying in the fields. You can hear the slow creak of a cart carrying the harvest home. And sometimes, in the middle of a hard day, you bite into a cherry so red and sweet that for 5 seconds you forget everything else. You also learn to hide from the sun. Everyone does. You start to wake up earlier, before dawn, to get the heavy work done. At midday, you huddle in the shade of a barn or a tree. And you drink from a skin of water, lukewarm but precious. The old people sit together under the trees, fanning themselves with their hands. And talk about summers before this one. When they were young, when the fairs still filled the meadows with color. The bees grow louder, and the honey jars fill again. You take some to the trading circle. But you keep one jar back for yourself. Because on a day when your body is covered in dust, there's nothing like dipping a crust of bread into honey and letting it melt on your tongue. It tastes like light itself. But no matter how sweet the summer moments, you can't stop looking toward the horizon of autumn. It comes almost without warning. A faint chill in the mornings. A blush of red on the first leaves. And then, one morning, a thin mist lying low over the fields like a white blanket. Autumn smells different. There's the scent of apples, sharp and sweet. And of wood smoke rising from the chimneys. The grain comes in from the fields, bundled and stacked like giant loaves of bread. The harvest festival still happens, though quieter this year. There are fewer people. But they still pile the table high with whatever the land gave. Barley loaves, carrots with the earth still clinging to them, a little cheese, a single roasted chicken for everyone to share. It's not grand, but it's something. You find yourself laughing on those days. The way the wind ruffles the tablecloth. The way a girl slips on an apple peel and everyone cheers when she doesn't fall. You think, maybe the world hasn't forgotten how to be kind. And then, of course, winter returns. The nights come earlier. The mornings bite your fingers with frost. You mend your shoes with scraps of leather. Because walking on frozen ground wears them down to nothing. You chop wood until your arms ache. And still it never feels like enough. Inside the houses, the fires burn low. Smoke curls up through the thatched roofs and hangs heavy in the cold air. Outside, everything goes quiet. The fields lie flat and white with frost. Even the birds seem to vanish. You huddle close to the hearth. Soup simmers in the pot, thin, watery, but hot, and you stretch your hands toward the heat. The nights are long. You wake sometimes and think it must be nearly morning. But when you peek out the window, it's still dark. The stars sharp and cold as needles. The songs come back stronger in winter. When the wind howls outside and rattles the shutters, you hear voices lift up, singing the same songs you learned in the warmer months. It's the only way to remind yourself that you are still alive. But even in the harshest weeks, something small and stubborn is at work under the ground. There's a moment, a quiet, ordinary morning, when you step outside, and you hear it. The trickle of water as the ice begins to melt. And just like that, the wheel turns again. The historians will one day argue. Did the plague change the rhythm of the seasons? Did villages like yours plant less, harvest less, celebrate less? Or did the seasons keep their pace? Indifferent to all the things humans worried over. No one can fully agree. But you, living it, know the truth. The seasons never asked your permission. They roll forward, no matter what. And that, strangely, becomes your anchor. The flowers still bloom in spring. No matter how hard the bells ring. The summer still hums with bees. Even if you can't sleep for worry. The autumn wind still cools your face. No matter how heavy the year has been. And the winter still ends. Every single time. There's a kind of peace in that. It tells you, you are part of something bigger. That life existed before you. And it will exist after you. So you keep going. You plant. You reap. You dry apples for the cold months. And you wait for the earth to start all over again. And maybe, just maybe, that's the closest thing to hope you've ever known. At first, you don't trust it. How could you? After so many moons of bells and whispers, after months of mud walls and empty lanes, the idea that things could get better feels like a trick. But one morning, when you step outside, you notice something so small, so ordinary, that you almost cry from surprise. The sound of a hoe hitting the soil. It's not much. Just a steady thok, 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 like someone knocking on the earth to see if it's still alive. You turn your head, and there, down the lane, someone has decided to take their field back. They stand with their back bent, hair tied up, hands working as if the land itself might forget them if they don't hurry. You stand there for a long moment. And something in you shifts. The first signs of recovery are not grand. They're quiet. A boy sweeping leaves off a doorstep. A woman scrubbing a table that hasn't seen bread dough in weeks. Two neighbors mending the same fence, wordlessly, side by side. After so long of standing still, even movement feels like a miracle. The fields come back first. The earth doesn't hold grudges. As soon as hands return to it, seeds scatter, little green shoots poke their heads up, and soon there's a whisper of color across the furrows. You see cabbages unfurling like fists unclenching. Beans climbing their wooden poles as if nothing ever happened. It's not just the food. There's a rhythm to it, the kind of rhythm the plague almost stole. Plant. Water. Weed. Wait. Life becomes a little less about fear and a little more about what's next. Of course, there are still gaps. There are fields that will stay empty this year because no one is left to tend them. But for every patch of abandoned ground, there's another where someone has started again. And then, one morning, the market comes back. Not the circle of desperate barter like before. But a slow, careful gathering in the village square. A few baskets of onions. A loaf of bread. A jug of milk. People stand farther apart than they used to. But they are there. The first time someone laughs again at the market. It catches everyone off guard. A woman drops a carrot. And a little boy runs to fetch it and hands it back to her with a bow so dramatic he nearly falls over. Someone snorts. Then giggles. And then, just like that, the sound of laughter tumbles across the square like it remembers the way. You start noticing faces you thought you'd never see again. People who were sick but got better. They walk slower now. And their eyes carry something you can't quite name. But they are here. One man lifts his hat to you and says, "Not dead yet." You laugh. Not because it's funny. But because it's the bravest joke you've heard all year. It's not only people who heal. Animals return, too. A dog you haven't seen since spring trots down the lane, tail wagging. A pair of cats appear near the bakery, sly as always, waiting for scraps. Chickens cluck in the yards again. Their feathers bright against the dirt. You didn't realize how much you missed these simple sounds. The church bells sound different now. They still toll for the lost sometimes, yes. But more and more they ring for other reasons. The first day of planting. A wedding that was delayed for months. A child's birth. The sound of joy takes practice after so much mourning. But little by little, the bells are relearning, too. And in the evenings, when the songs rise again, you notice that the voices sound steadier. Not carefree, never that, but no longer as thin and trembling. One day, you realize that people are coming closer to one another. Not all at once. It starts with a hand offered to help lift a bucket. Then two heads bent together over a piece of cloth. A bench in the church with one less empty space between. The invisible walls between you all begin to soften. Of course, you don't forget what has happened. You never will. But you begin to live alongside it, instead of inside it. There's a moment, a single perfect moment. When you're standing in the field pulling weeds. And you stop. And you look around. And you see a cloud of dust where a horse cart rolls by. The shimmer of heat over the fields. Someone laughing, real and loud, somewhere beyond the trees. And for the first time in a long time, you think, this looks like a village again. Historians in the future will have charts and diagrams showing how population numbers went up. How the economy recovered. How the land was tilled again. They'll write about recovery as if it's neat and tidy. But you know it's not. You know it's made of small, uneven steps. And 100 tiny choices to keep going even when everything in you wants to give up. Some things will never come back. There are faces missing from the table. Empty spots in the square where certain voices used to be. Every time you see a field that stays wild, you remember why. But somehow, even with those absences, life stitches itself together. You notice the return of color. The first time someone plants flowers outside their door again. The first time someone wears a red scarf instead of the dull browns everyone's been hiding in. You realize that hope has a color after all. One morning, a boy runs down the lane flying a kite. You watch the fabric snap in the wind. Bright and defiant against the sky. You think, would he have done that last year? Would any of us? And you, too, find yourself doing things you thought you'd forgotten. Washing your hair, just because. Mending your clothes so they look like something new. Making a stew with more than one spice. Little luxuries that say, I plan to be here tomorrow. There's still talk of the sickness, of course. It hasn't vanished completely. It lingers, as all disasters do. But the talk has changed. It's no longer a howl. It's a murmur. Something you carry in your pocket. But that no longer crushes you under its weight. Even the children begin to sound different. They play louder. Their games stretching into the lanes again. You hear them running. And it's the first time in so long that running sounds like joy instead of fear. One day, someone comes to you and says, "We're thinking of rebuilding the fairground." You almost laugh. A fairground? With ribbons and music and stalls? It sounds impossible. And yet, as you watch the fields fill with green again, you think, why not? Recovery is slow. It's clumsy. It doesn't happen all at once. But it happens. And standing there, hoe in hand, sun on your shoulders, you feel something you haven't let yourself feel in a very, very long time. A future. You don't know exactly what it looks like. It's hazy, like a picture drawn in the mist. But you know this. If you plant a seed today, something will be there tomorrow to greet it. And for now, that's enough. Years pass, and one day you wake up and realize that the air smells different. The sharp edge of fear that once clung to every stone and roof tile has faded. And in its place there is something softer, time. Settling over the village like dust over a wooden beam. And you, still here, find yourself doing something you once thought impossible. You look back. At first, you look back by accident. It happens while you're tying up a bundle of beans. Your hands busy, your thoughts wandering. And you hear the faint clang of a distant bell. It isn't a funeral bell this time. It's for a wedding, or maybe a baptism. But just that sound, just that single note, tugs you by the sleeve and pulls you back into the past. Back to a time when the bells were all you heard. Back when they marked the hours like a heartbeat. One toll after another after another. For a moment, you stand frozen. Beans in hand. Watching your own shadow on the ground. And then you let yourself remember. You remember how it began. The whispers. The strange fever no one understood. The cartwheels on the road. Taking someone away and never bringing them back. You remember the mud walls. The hastily built barriers on the edge of the village. And the way you learned to breathe through your sleeve. Whenever a stranger passed by. And then you remember how you survived. Not because you had medicine. There wasn't any. You survived because you learned to do small, stubborn things. To wash your hands with cold water and time leaves. Even when you doubted it would matter. To stand in your field when the ground softened in spring. Because planting something was better than standing still. To sing when the dark got too heavy. You remember the loneliness. It comes back to you like a cold wind. How even your closest friend kept their distance. How you learned to talk with your eyes when mouths were hidden behind cloths. How every hello became a cautious nod instead of a hug. And then you remember the kindnesses. Bright as lanterns in the fog. The woman who handed you lavender for a single egg. The boy who played the pipe at the lane's edge. Squeaky but brave. The neighbor who whispered, "We are still here." On a night when the sky was so black you couldn't see the next house. As the years pass, those are the things that remain most clearly. Not the fear. Not even the hunger. But the moments of stubborn humanity in the middle of it all. Looking back, you realize the plague taught you strange lessons. You never asked to learn. Like how valuable a jar of honey can be. Like how a chicken can be worth more than a silver coin. Like how a song, whispered at the right moment, can be stronger than a wall. You think of the way people made do. Mixing herbs because they had no doctor. Trading charms because they had no cure. Keeping the lanes swept. As if a broom could hold back something invisible. It wasn't perfect. But it was something. And sometimes, something is enough. You also think of the strange healers. The ones who wandered in with their bags of dried plants. Their bottles of vinegar. Their half-hopeful, half-absurd promises. Some of them were charlatans. You know that now. But a few truly tried. And sometimes you wonder. Did the effort matter more than the result? You remember the songs at night. That, above all, is what comes back to you most vividly. The soft murmur that would float across the fields. From one shuttered house to another. Like a thread of gold weaving you all together. Those songs were the first thing that made you believe. That the village might still exist tomorrow. Even now, years later. When the night gets very still. You sometimes find yourself humming those tunes without thinking. Historians, oh, you've heard them talk. They come from the towns. From the cities where the streets are cobbled and there's always someone to write things down. They say words like resilience and adaptation. They say the peasants were resourceful. And you nod. But inside you think. No. We weren't strong because we wanted to be. We were strong because there was no other choice. Sometimes, when the younger ones ask. You tell them how it really was. You say. Imagine living a whole year with your breath held. Imagine every cough you hear turning the ground colder under your feet. Imagine watching the fields grow empty and the paths grow silent. And then imagine deciding, every single morning, to keep going anyway. You tell them about the things you lost. People you loved. Dreams you thought were unshakable. And then you tell them about the things you found. In the ruins of that year. How neighbors can become family, even when you can't touch them. How a single loaf of bread, shared, can taste like a feast. How the earth, indifferent to everything, still gives you wildflowers every spring. And sometimes, after a long pause, you tell them the most important thing of all. That the sickness ended. Not quickly, not neatly. But it ended. And we were still here. Years later, when you look around at the village as it is now, it's hard to believe what it once looked like. The fields are green again. The fences are straight. Children run through the lanes. Chasing chickens that have no idea they were ever used as currency. The songs in the evenings are no longer about fear. They're just songs. Sometimes you sit on a bench outside the church. And just listen to the ordinary sounds. A door slamming. A horse snorting. Someone calling, dinner. And you think. These noises are worth more than gold. You find yourself thankful for small things you never noticed before the plague. The weight of a basket full of beans. The sweet smell of a loaf of bread. Fresh out of the oven. The chatter of two neighbors arguing over something so small it's almost funny. Life, in its ordinary clothes, is a gift. Looking back, you realize you have changed. The fear shaped you. But so did the stubbornness to live. The children born after the sickness ask. Were you scared all the time? You think about it. And you tell them the truth. Yes. But I planted seeds anyway. I sang anyway. I traded a chicken for a handful of time and pretended it was magic. I kept living anyway. And maybe, in the end, that's what survival is. It isn't a big, brave gesture. It's 1,000 little choices. To wake up. To feed the animals. To plant something. To sweep your doorstep. To hum a song when the night gets long. You close your eyes sometimes and see that young version of yourself. The one standing alone in the muddy lane. Unsure if the world will ever be whole again. And you wish you could lean over and whisper. You make it. Not because it gets easy, but because you keep going. And when you open your eyes, you see your village as it is now. Not perfect. Not untouched. But alive. And you know, with a strange and gentle certainty, that this is the proof you needed. The years turn. The bells ring for weddings. The fields keep their green rhythm. And life, ordinary, stubborn, miraculous life, has returned. And you, looking back, realize that the memory of that long, hard time has turned into a story you will carry for the rest of your days. Because in a world with no medicine, no map, no promises, you found a way to endure. And now, every time you see a new sprig of time pushing out of the earth, or hear a child laugh in the square, you know exactly what that endurance has built. The nights are different now. You don't notice when it happened exactly. One season melted into another, and then, quite suddenly, you realize that the sharp, metallic edge of fear has softened into something gentler. There is still work to be done, always. But the rhythm of the days is slower now. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, you stop in the middle of the lane, look up, and actually see the stars again. You stand there for a while, head tilted back, the cool air brushing your face. The same constellations that you once saw when you were a child are still there, like patient guardians that waited all this time for you to remember to look up. Somewhere far off, a door closes. A dog barks once, then curls up to sleep. The fields whisper with the faintest wind. You can smell the earth, warm, steady, ordinary. It's strange, isn't it, how even after so much, the world keeps handing you small gifts. A flower growing wild in a ditch. A loaf of bread that rises just right. A child laughing so hard their cheeks turn red. Little things that no historian will ever bother to write down, but that are bigger than all the fear put together. You walk slowly back to your house, and your footsteps feel lighter than they used to. At the door, you pause. Once, you would have checked 3 times that the latch was closed, that no one strange was coming down the road. Tonight, you just lean against the frame for a moment, breathing. Inside, the room smells of wood smoke. The embers in the hearth glow like sleepy fireflies. You settle on the bench, your hands warm from the coals. If you listen, really listen, the world is full of sounds again. Not bells this time. Just life, the slow rustle of someone turning over in bed. A faint song in the distance. The low hum of someone talking softly so as not to wake the house. These are the sounds that tell you that the worst has passed. That morning always comes. That the sky is wide enough for sorrow and joy to sit side by side. You think about tomorrow. There will be seeds to plant, a fence to mend, a story to tell to the little ones who never saw that dark year. And maybe tomorrow evening, there will be singing again, but this time, just because you can. You can almost hear it already. The first notes rising with the smell of bread. Turning in the air like a leaf in the breeze. So you let your shoulders drop. And you let the quiet wrap itself around you like a blanket. You close your eyes and imagine yourself lying in the middle of a wide, green field. The grass cool against your skin. The sky is soft, endless blue above you. All around, the world breathes. The seasons still move, slow and certain. And you, finally, feel safe enough to drift with them. Your breathing slows. The fire sinks lower. The wind taps gently at the shutter like an old friend. And the sound of the world fades. And it feels like the whole earth is whispering one simple thing. You made it. You're home. Good night.